Hello everyone, Ethan here, and welcome to the first introduction lecture on this channel. Now, the introduction series is my attempt to provide a basic understanding of some very fundamental questions of what the underlying heart of socionics is. And so in these videos I'll be exploring basic questions like, what is socionics? What is the responsible use of socionics? And then I'll be going over some foundational models and some foundational ideas that can help pave the way for our future understanding of socionics in these video lectures. So, to start off, to kick off this introduction series, I thought I would ask the most basic question of all, is why study typology? For those of you who are stumbling upon my channel for the first time, you may look at this theory, you may look at the socionics model, and say, well, this isn't something that you could consider scientific. Why would you be studying it? Why am I here? And why am I studying typology? What is worth it? And so this lecture is sort of an attempt of mine to clear up any misconceptions about the nature of typology as a whole, and to attempt to grind into you a little bit of the purpose of this model and a little bit of the purpose of why typology is useful as a whole. So what I went over very briefly, just a little bit earlier, is that people view this theory as unscientific. If you've been around in the typology community for long enough, it's very easy to see that MBTI, Enneagram, and all of these other very popular Western typology theories are quickly branded as unscientific. A lot of people will come in and they'll say, well, this is not what personality psychologists study. This is not mainstream psychology, as if it's not scientific, it's not useful at all. And so I figured, well, that's not really true. We have a structure to typology, and we have a way that we use typology to benefit ourselves and others. And so I crafted sort of an operational definition in psych terms of the methodology of typology and how it's used. So my definition for this is typology consists in the qualitative observations that highlight differences between people for the purpose of understanding. And then I added a little note is that it's not considered mainstream psych. So this is not, the key word here I would say is qualitative. I think quantitative measures of study, like you may know the popular empirical assessment, the Big Five or the ocean model, that's considered mainstream psych because it's quantitative, because it uses empirical standards of measurement, because it goes out, collects data, and finds correlations that can be attributed to different things. Typology does none of those things. It attempts to take our observations, that we see the world in the way that we do, put it into a structure in order to highlight some basic differences between people so that it can help us orient ourselves in the world around us. And so, for example, the reason why it's not considered mainstream psych is because psychology has changed over time. When Jung first formulated his theory of the types in the 1930s, his work was considered mainstream psych. But nowadays, psychoanalytic theory is something that was relegated to the dustbin of antiquity. And so maybe if nowadays it's not considered mainstream psych, I still treat typology personally as if it does have a methodology, as if it does have a standard of operation that we can use consistently to draw conclusions for ourselves. Moving to the next part of this lecture, I would like to highlight some reasons and some ways in which we use typology in our everyday lives, and to help you understand how typology can be useful if it's unscientific. I've met a lot of skeptical people in my time learning typology that will talk to me and say, well, why would you use something that's unscientific? Why would you waste your time with something that isn't grounded in mainstream personality psych? And so I've created a sort of typology of typologies here to help you understand in how many different ways we use typologies to help ourselves understand things. I've kind of structured them from simple to complex. In the first category we have personal typologies, these everyday assessments that we make about our daily lives. For example, when you hear somebody say, oh, there's two types of people in this world, type A and type B, that's more of a personal typology. It's a person making an observation, noticing something in the world around them, and then creating a structure to define that. Another way we look at that is stereotypes, like the jock, or the nerd, or the academic, or the try-hard. All of these different stereotypes that we have to help us recognize different types of people, categorize them, help us behave differently around those types of people. There's also generations. For example, people will say, boomers do this, Gen X's do this. And while a lot of those categories may not be scientific, people use them anyway to help orient themselves in the world around them. And I know that I keep saying that, and I know that I'm trying to stop beating a dead horse here, but really, a lot of people just use personal typology for that reason, is to help create an understanding. And then the last thing I wanted to go over with personal typology is sort of folk psychology. Folk psychology, as defined, is the way that everyday people, without a scientific method, construct observations and predictions of the world around them, specifically in the human realm. So where psychology is the actual scientific discipline, folk psychology is something a little bit closer to typology in terms of usefulness and methodology. Another way that people use typologies is functional, professional, in careers, etc. For example, in sports, some people are considered to have fast twitch muscles and slow twitch muscles that can help them orient themselves in terms of running and other sports activities. There are business typologies. For example, even the Myers-Briggs is used in a business context to help people figure out, well, how can we best maximize effectiveness in the workplace? How can we best orient people? How can we best determine their role in the company? And so that the company can attain a streamlined operation and proceed as effectively as possible. And then there's medical typologies. For example, they'll say, especially among this recent COVID outbreak, they'll say, well, the aging population is affected in this way. The young population is affected in this way, making a typology of people that can help regular, everyday Joes understand the significance of these medical conclusions. And then the last kind of category that I wanted to go over in terms of typologies is NeoSpiritual typologies. And what I mean by NeoSpiritual is sort of all of those ideologies that, in their transfer from the East to the West, have kind of warped and shifted in their practice. And so I would categorize Enneagram under NeoSpiritual. It's more of a complex typology. There are 9 types that are supposedly have like a path, or more like a spiritual journey, more like core fears. And these are things that I feel fall under this sort of transfer of ideology from East to West. There's also Jung. Jung got a lot of his ideas from the East, and so nowadays, while he wouldn't be put into the mainstream psych category, I'd probably put him into the neo-spiritual category, because he did receive a lot of his ideas from those Eastern perspectives. And then also self-help. If you've ever seen a self-help book, self-development, all of those sort of ideological self-help techniques that you may see proliferated in the media, that also kind of falls under this neo-spiritual category. So as you can see, from simple to complex, people use typology in all areas of their lives. This is not something that is just restricted to the crackpots. This is not something that's just restricted to people who use pseudoscience. It's something that all types of people, everyday people, professional people, spiritual people use to help improve their understanding of the world around them, to help use constructed categories to make their role in the world easier to process and more effective. So the conclusion that we've come to in this video is that why study typology? Typology facilitates understanding. It helps us create a better worldview, a better compass with which to manage our position in the world. It helps maximize effectiveness. If you know what to do and you know what you are as a person, then you can better determine your role in a system or your role in a workplace. It also helps with personal growth. If you know what your development path is, or you create a development path for yourself, you can help create a sense of personal satisfaction in your life that could improve beyond the scope of something more scientific. And so, while typology may be something that is branded as unscientific, it has all sorts of uses. And while Socionics may not be considered something mainstream, it has all sorts of uses as well that I will be going over in future video lectures. So that's basically the topic for today. I hope you learned something. I hope you got something out of this little demonstration here. And I will see you all in the next video.